You know, some rulers build monuments, others build empires, and then you have someone like the Kangxi Emperor, a man whose life story is just this incredible masterclass in power, conflict, and, believe it or not, creating a golden age. So let's dive in and really get to know the story of this extraordinary ruler.
Okay, first, let's just let this number sink in for a second. 61 years. That is the longest reign in all of Chinese history, and it's one of the longest for any monarch anywhere in the world ever. That's an entire lifetime of unbelievable change, with this one remarkable man right at the center of it all.
So how on earth does a child emperor not only survive that kind of pressure, but actually thrive? Well, we're going to follow his journey. We'll start with him as a boy who has to literally seize power for himself, then see him become a warrior, forging a truly unified empire. After that, we'll explore the incredible cultural golden age he kicked off, before we get into the really tragic family drama that almost tore everything apart. And, of course, at the end, we have to ask, what is his ultimate legacy?
All right, so our story doesn't begin with some all-powerful conqueror. No, it starts with a 7-year-old boy. In 1661, the boy who would become the Kangxi Emperor inherited the throne of this massive, still pretty unstable empire. But here's the catch. The real power wasn't his. It was in the hands of 4 powerful regents his father had appointed. So his position? Yeah, it was anything but secure.
And things moved so fast, it's honestly breathtaking. Within just a year of him taking the throne, one of those regents, this incredibly formidable guy named Oh Boy, basically seized absolute power. For years, the young emperor had to just watch and wait, biding his time. But then, in 1669, when he was just 15 years old, Kangxi made his move. With some help from his grandmother, he had Oh Boy arrested and took personal, direct control of the empire. Just like that, the boy had become the master.
So, taking back his own throne? That was just the beginning, the first hurdle. Now he had the even bigger job of securing the empire itself. And I mean, from every direction, you had these powerful forces threatening to tear the new Qing Dynasty apart before it even had a chance to get going.
The biggest threat from inside the empire was this thing called the Revolt of the Three Feudatories. So who were they? They were 3 super powerful warlords, old Ming Dynasty generals, who had been given control over these huge chunks of southern China. When Kangxi tried to, pull them back in line, they rebelled. And that sparked a brutal 8-year-long civil war. It was a conflict that came dangerously close to splitting the empire in 2. And it's something Kangxi himself later said he regretted because of the staggering cost in human life.
So Kangxi's first order of business was to crush this rebellion. It was a huge undertaking. He relied heavily on his Han Chinese generals, and after 8 long, bloody years, he finally succeeded in 1681. Just 2 years after that, he sent a fleet to conquer Taiwan, which had become the last little hideout for Ming loyalists. You can see a strategy crystal clear. Lock down the south, then make sure the coasts are secure.
But the threats didn't stop there, not by a long shot. Up in the north, he was dealing with Tsarist Russia pushing into his territory. He actually managed to push them back, and it all ended with the Treaty of Nerchinsk, which was actually China's first ever treaty with a European power. And then out west, he personally led armies deep into the steppe to take on the powerful Dzungar Mongols. He was literally a commander on every single front.
Okay, so with the empire finally unified and its borders more or less secure, Kangxi was able to pull off this brilliant strategic pivot. He shifted from being a warrior to being a scholar emperor, and this is what really kicked off a long period of stability and prosperity that historians now call the High Qing era.
Now, this wasn't just about having peace and quiet, it was about building a unified culture. Kangxi sponsored these absolutely monumental scholarly projects. You've got the Kangxi Dictionary, which standardized Chinese characters for generations, and the huge compilation of the complete Tang poems. This was just a brilliant political move. Think about it. By becoming the #1 patron of Han Chinese culture, he won over the intellectual class, a lot of whom were still loyal to the old Ming Dynasty. He basically brought all the best minds in the empire over to his side. At the same time, Kangxi had this really complicated relationship with the West. He was absolutely fascinated by the knowledge of Jesuit missionaries, especially when it came to stuff like astronomy and technology. So in 1692, he issued what's called an Edict of Toleration, basically making Christianity legal. But that open door, it slammed shut pretty hard. Why? Well, the Pope back in Rome condemned traditional Chinese practices like ancestor worship. Kangxi saw this as a huge sign of disrespect and totally unacceptable interference in China's business, so he reversed course and banned Christian missions in 1715.
But for all of his incredible public triumphs, Kangxi's later years were just dominated by this private tragedy. A bitter, long, and very public fight among his many sons over who would get the throne. It was the one crisis that the all-powerful emperor was completely powerless to solve. And right at the center of this whole storm was his second son, Yinreng. He was named crown prince when he was just a toddler, literally 2 years old. Kangxi personally oversaw his education, grooming him for decades to be the perfect heir. But Yinreng grew up to be a cruel and, frankly, immoral man. The emperor was heartbroken. He deposed him, but then reinstated him 2 years later, just hoping he'd changed. He hadn't. After Yinreng was caught up in yet another scheme to grab power, Kangxi disgraced him for good.
You can just feel the raw pain and fury in the emperor's own words here. I mean, this wasn't some cold political statement. This was a father publicly condemning the son who had been his greatest hope and had become his greatest failure. So after 61 years of war, peace, incredible creation, and personal heartbreak, how do you even begin to sum it all up? How do we weigh the monumental successes of Kangxi's reign against its really significant failures?
The balance sheet of his reign is, well, it's just staggering. On the one hand, you have the triumphs. He unified a vast empire. He kicked off an era of peace and prosperity, and he sponsored some of China's greatest cultural works. But on the other hand, you have the tragedies. Those wars of consolidation were unbelievably brutal. The succession crisis scarred his family and the entire court for years. And even something that sounds good, like freezing the land tax in 1712, ended up creating huge financial problems for the dynasty down the road.
Which really just leaves us with this one final thought. Kangxi was the master of a continent. He was a brilliant general, a patron of culture. He built one of the greatest and most long-lasting empires in history. And yet, he couldn't control his own family. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much does a ruler's private life, their personal failings and their heartbreaks, how much does that really shape their public historical legacy?